So can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So last time we got together, we went through the first 8 essays of the reflections of the Secret Doctrine. So the first 8 being defining the doctrine, what it is, and doctrine versus dogma. And then we went through defining the secret, why it was a secret. And then the collaborative effort, how Madame Blavatsky was the chosen one with the adepts, to present this message, because she had the ability to present this information, not the physical, mental, emotional abilities to present this message to the public from the adepts, right? And then we went through we are greater than we know, and then the Theosophy, a living tradition, mundane secrets, and transcendent mysteries. Today, I think we stopped at bridging the gap between the known and the unknown. Today, we're going to continue with no apology needed. No apology needed. Let me see. Oops, sorry, I should have gone through these slides. Any questions before we get started with today's? So, no apology needed. It talks about coming to terms with greatness is neither quick or easy. We will not be able to hear its hidden melodies or tune to its cosmic harmonies without putting forth mental effort. So what it talks about is it takes a lot of effort to be able to hear the messages of what's written in the Secret Doctrine. Oops, let me see. Okay, where can I forward this? Why the secrecy? Because the world is not ready. The world's prejudices have to be conquered step by step and not at a rush. With the publication of the Secret Doctrine, Madame Blavatsky lifted a small portion of the veil of the benefits to humankind. What the world does with those teachings will determine whether or not the rest of the secrets will be unveiled.
Can you go back on the no apology needed? Maybe
Sure.
you can talk a little bit more about this. So I think it had to do with the context, right? Most of the teaching, there's a certain context and expectation in terms of the reader. And so the Secret Doctrine is no different than any other book. There's a set of context of the assumption that are made, like who are the supposedly reader and student that can actually absorb the material. So yes, like Jamshed mentioned earlier, the material that are presented in the Secret Doctrine is not readily digestible, I guess, by the how do we say the inexperience or what's the term they usually use for the person to actually start on the path. I forgot what was that term. Anyway, so like any other doctrine, it can only be consumed when you have the proper experience and knowledge to consume it, right? So the problem is if the material itself is a lot more complicated to digest, then it's difficult to make it digestible to everyone involved. So that's my thought on in terms of this particular essay. No apologies needed when you present something that is perhaps way ahead of its time.
True. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, John.
I think also David made mention of Paul Jacobs, who is the chief of organ in department at the Juilliard School of Music. And he said that, I mean, there's a quote that there's no denying that the music of the great masters of the past makes demands upon listeners. However, today's classical musicians constantly apologize for these demands in an effort to be listener-friendly. But great music needs no apology. So he goes also on to say that the Secret Doctrine being a great literature, it doesn't need an apology when people say that, oh, it's so difficult to read, so difficult to understand. Anything, and I actually even goes on to end that section by saying that if you don't make the mental effort, then the music will forever fall upon deaf ears. You cannot. So I guess what he's saying is trying to compare it with the great music. So this Secret Doctrine, it's a great literature, and it requires effort to really understand it. Just like great music also requires effort.
I believe anything that we want to do in life, it takes effort, right? I don't know how much of it is handed on a silver platter. Just here it is.
Yeah, and
Go ahead, Anne.
I was just going to say, I think part of the difficulty is the time in which it is written, because if I read any of the authors, for example, if you read Charles Fillmore, who actually was later than Blavatsky, his stuff is more difficult to read, and it's because of some of the references or according to the times, and we're not in that particular era of that culture. And so it has to be interpreted and a lot of that, it's not meant to be obtuse. It's just because the times are different that we've got to kind of undo two things. One is there are the hidden messages that we have to understand to move past the symbology through contemplative study, but also because the times and the language that was spoken, even just the words that were used, that sometimes we don't even use those words anymore. So I think that adds to the complexity of the study.
Which is so true. Thanks, Anne, for bringing that point up, because even in these chapters, many references to back to different centuries, right? And writers and poets and people we're not familiar with that culture and that time frame. So how do we bring it forward to this present time and understand the meaning of those the writings in present time?
Also, I want to bring up another point. Normally, if somebody wants to take a course, normally they're supposed to have completed some prerequisites. For instance, you cannot take calculus without completing basic algebra and basic trig. So I wonder what is the the basic requirements to really read the Secret Doctrine, because it's never put forward that this is maybe what you really need to understand. You would have to understand maybe some basic ideas like reincarnation, karma, and all that sort of thing, cycles and all that before you can really tackle this. But that's something which we don't see it.
Well, the analogy is like just like reading the Bible. You can't say read the Bible and you understand. Everybody has a different what do you call it? What's the word I'm looking for? Interpretation of it, depending on their experience and their perspective at that time. So I believe reading the Secret Doctrine messages will apply to each individual based on the mindset at that time they're reading it and how they apply it from their perspective in their life experience at that time. And then you read it again and say, oh, this is what it means because I've gone through the experience and this is what it means. I don't know. Anybody else has any thought on that?
I just want to add one more thing, and that is just the sheer volume of the Secret Doctrine. It's so much to read. I have, for example, when I get the Quest magazine, I love to read it, but I contemplate things. I don't read things like for information. And so it takes me a week or two just to read the Quest magazine because I'm getting through, I'm looking at references, I'm contemplating, I'm trying to bring it back to what I already know. And I mark off each article that I've written so that I'll know that I've read it, and so I won't reread it. And so I think that has, just to get through the sheer volume, for me, the way I read is difficult.
True. I mean, it is something to read and contemplate, not just to read, and because that's the difference from the very first thing that was mentioned is this is a doctrine. It's not a dogma, right? When nobody's forced to believe anything that's written in the Secret Doctrine, it's questionable, right? A doctrine can become a dogma with an element of coercion when people are forced to accept an idea or concept without the ability to question or interpret. Any other thoughts?
I also think that it had to do with the fact that the Secret Doctrine is moving toward more of the abstract level, right? So you're no longer in the concrete everyday, day-to-day activity that you are doing on a daily basis. When you read this thing, you gotta, like Anne said, you gotta contemplate the material, and then it come up with the idea in the world and the realm of the idea and the abstract. It's not the same as a concrete materialistic world that we are dealing with on an everyday basis, which we are easy to adapt and easy to understand. And abstract thinking, it takes a different level of mentality. Yeah, mentality and effort to exert to understand the abstract idea.
Which is true, because most of what, from what I'm, just reading is beyond this physical world, beyond this material world, and there's another world, and it's bridging that gap, right, beyond this physical world and the world that there is another world. That how do we, and I think we also talked to, or maybe it's further down, we're going to talk about the logos. It talks about bringing in from the unknown, the world that from the not materialized into materializing it into the physical. So a lot of it is, we really have to have a lot of abstract thinking, like you said, right?
Also, there's another thing about the nature of the book. It is not any book. It is, if you haven't read what B.P. Wadia written about, give you some hint of how to tackle the Secret Doctrine. Smack dab right in the middle. He mentioned, and he brought it out, that this book was purposely and deliberately written this way. Not to please you, not to make you understand, not to explain every piece of it into plain sight. It wasn't written for everybody. I mean, you have to evolve into this and be ready for it when that time of your evolution came or have arrived. There's no requisites that you can prepare yourself for. You can try, but you can't get there until you evolve far enough to be there. So I just sent out the link in the chat. You can read about it and get some hints. There are things in there that seemingly mistake. It was written like that on purpose. Don't even try to change the spelling, correction, any of that. All of that is contributing to stretching your intellect into the intuition realm. So if you're going crazy reading the book, you're on the right track. Because that is stirring up something and then making you work.
Well, that's stirring up questions, the inquisitive mind, right?
Right.
If you right, and if you're not stirred up by questions, then the messages, and just you're just not open to the messages. But there will be.
Right, because your brain, the way your brain works, it keeps going, firing the synapses in the same old groove pattern from the day that you're born to the day that you die. If you don't force it to create new pattern of electrical firing in your brain, which bring you to a different way of seeing things. When that happens, when you get confused and all of that, something happened inside of you as well in your physical body. If you go at it long enough, you get something out of it.
Yeah, also to add up to what Timothy said, a lot of the authors claim that the book was written to develop our intuition, that as we struggle to understand it, then we get closer and closer to the author's mind. It reminds me of these, in Buddhism, they have this set that deals with koans, where you are given some words like, what is that? What is the sound of one hand clapping? And then you have to struggle and struggle and struggle to find out the answer. But then to really find the answer, you need to transcend the mind to find the answer.
Oh yeah, that was an example of Zen koan.
Yeah.
Zen koan. When he slapped his hand onto his lap, and the audience heard the sound of the slapping. Well, before that, somebody asked, "What is Zen?" And he answered by clapping his hand, making that sound. And then he explained. He said, "When I clap my hand, did you hear the sound?" Everybody said yes. He asked then, "Was there any thought in it. There was no thought in it. There was just sound, no thought. In that instant, that is Zen. That is your true nature is in that instant, right before thought kicked in.
Well, it's like when you're hit with something in life and you don't have time to think about it, you just drop into it. Have y'all had that experience where you just something happens to you? And I learned this from my Qigong master. When he was being taught, he says, "What is Zen?" And his master gave him a kick. And he just flew and just hit the wall. It's like, we had no time to think, right? You fall into that, no time to think, you just drop into that moment. Like,
Right.
okay, that Zen moment, yeah, the moment that you just, yeah.
Right. And the Zen koan explaining further, it's explaining that the more that you feel that you don't know about something, you are closer to yourself than you realize.
So I think as Theosophists, we practice this, and the way I relate to it is when we meditate, we drop into ourselves and be curious who ourselves, be curious of who we are, what we are. And there's a curiosity of our being. Don't you think? Dropping into ourselves and just feeling that silence within and then being curious.
I also want to add something. I know we're really going on about the complexity of the Secret Doctrine, but if you read the article on Dr. Franz Hartmann, who wrote letters back and forth to the masters, and he had a letter from KH, Kotumi, and which they were stressing the importance of independent actions. I want to just read what it says: involving independent actions for everyone, involving the dissemination of theosophical teachings. He says, and so the master says, you don't receive a lot of instructions from me. He said, we're leaders, but not child nurses. The weak ones, not the strong ones, are in constant need of definite orders, and at times our chelas satisfy their wishes. This is willing slavery, not healthy growth. Step forward and try to see clearly for yourself what is most needed for the society. And so I thought that was pretty cool. He just said, we're not spoon feeding you. You have to really take responsibility for your life here. Yeah, and that's what Master KH said.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah. Are we ready to move on to the next one?
Yep.
Yes. Why the secrecy? Well, in short, the chapter says the world is not ready. So we come from a society, it says here, we live in a democratic age where secrecy and confidentiality is often treated as suspect, right? And while we want transparency, openness are considered virtues. And it also mentions the world's prejudices have to be conquered step by step and not as a rush. And it also mentions that's why the Secret Doctrine raises but a small corner of the dark veil. So it's not everything. The world is not ready. And new opinions are always suspected and usually opposed without any reason, but because they're not already common. It's not a common belief. So what is a belief? What society thinks it's true, and we accept that as truth. Any other inputs on why the secrecy?
Well, for one, it's already listed because we're not ready.
Right.
And the other is because of the society is hunting down the initiate, the Gnostics, the Kabbalists, the Masons, and they persecute them.
Yes,
So
and I
they
think
so they have to go in secret.
right, and we talked about that earlier. Go ahead.
Yes, and the latest one happened during the last emperor, the where Jesus was hiding, and on the way in the process of hiding, he got initiated into um, the Jews community and learned about the Kabbalists, and then when the order came to persecute all of the initiate, he was escaped to Egypt, and also there he learned and become initiate into the Egyptian secret teaching. And then when the kissing of the killing, persecuting of the initiate stopped, then he came back with all this teaching that he'd been initiated to. So why the secrecy? Because they're being hunted.
True. Persecuted from not just here, even from centuries ago, right?
Yeah,
Why the adult?
it right. It gone from, well, Mesopotamium, Potamium, down that like 10,000 years before BC, and then all the way down to 500 AD. It happening throughout those time, and it's strongest during the time of the second half of the century. It started it, and then it get rise to the peak during the fourth and the fifth century. So
There's a, yeah, go ahead.
But even in civil society, there are some secrets, right? I mean, I don't have any top secret level certification to view what is going on in the U.S. military, because they only give them to people they can trust, right? So if in civil society there are some secrets that they don't want to give to the general public. The same applies here. There are some secrets that cannot be divulged, because as you said, we might not be ready.
We won't be able to handle it if, right, in civil society, if all the secrets were revealed, I think the society will go berserk.
well, no, it's the third aspect of it, because if it had to be, the key had to be withheld, because the the bad side will use that same knowledge for personal gain, for selfish reason, and that's why that whole Atlantean thing fell apart, because of that, because of the openness, and they use it in the wrong way. So that's why the teaching now, it always has a key. You can't get really understand the thing until you was communicated with that key from the master to the disciple, and it's the mouth to, from lips to ears teaching.
There's another aspect, put another little wrinkle in it. I call it the forbidden fruit syndrome. But do you know that the books that are most read and the titles that are most popular are ones that have the word secret in them? That people want to read a book that has secret in it because they want to know what the secret is. Everybody's looking for the key to life. So it may be, there may be another aspect of it, why it was called the Secret Doctrine, because that makes people want to read it. Unfortunately, even what is, in the Secret Doctrine, or what Blavatsky said, or what a lot of Theosophists are saying, they're still very maligned and misinterpreted. I mean, I was just reading a feed this morning on Blavatsky and the thing about the root races, and she had pulled some things out that Kotami had said and put them together with something else to make just this dastardly statement that was never, it was never a theosophical statement. But unfortunately, you couldn't put any comments in that. But you know, that's out for the public to read. That Blavatsky, you know, is her ideas of race and prejudice, and they backed it up with words that were, like I'm saying, they were totally out of context, and they weren't even by Blavatsky to prove their point. So I mean, the what did you call, persecution still goes on. I mean, the mental persecution.
Thank you, Anne. Anybody else?
This essay, they also mentioned about superstition, and it's also, that's a major cause of advancement. If you're superstitious and you, like T say, you tend to do things the way you normally train to do, your mind and normally your brain and normally wired to do, then you keep doing the same thing even though it's superstitious, right? So if you were to say that the act or the superstition act that they're doing is something that's wrong, then nobody gonna believe you, right? Because that's the way that they live their life. So it doesn't help anything to share the secret, and then it will be just pushed aside by whoever is superstitious.
Thank you, Trey. Anybody else before we move on? So the next essay talks about time, and this is so Madame Blavatsky wasn't the first one to have this point about time. What is time, right? So it talks about St. Augustine's dilemma. For what is time? Who can even comprehend it in thought or put the answer in words? How is it there are two times, past and future, when even the past now no longer and the future is now not yet? But if the present were always present and did not pass into the past time, it obviously would not be time but eternity. So there's a lot of conversation about time, right? What is time? Any thoughts, inputs?
Time is an illusion.
Is an illusion, man-made, isn't it? So
There's no time if there's no consciousness there to perceive time.
Is it consciousness or is it the mind that's doing that? Is time an aspect that is created by the mind?
Interesting, because this is a deep subject. Abstract thinking here.
In terms of because what happened is the mind thing had to be, the minds always do logical thinking, right? Reasoning, there got to be a method to this madness. The mind is always trying to determine what is logical, what is the reason behind this. It's trying to dissect, it's trying to analyze it. It's trying to put something that is meaningful, that logical, that you can put together. So time, to me, time is an aspect that was introduced by the mind itself to make it logical so that you can grasp the context of the idea behind whatever that you're dealing with.
I don't know. It was just basically, I mean, developed by the mind. But if you look back long time ago, I mean, it was developed, but developed through nature, right? Remember how a long time ago how did the hour and the day come by? People didn't have clocks, and they just watched the sunrise and sunset and just went by that, isn't it?
And the
And
moon, and the
and the
moon.
moon, and the
That
moon,
that was
yes,
the month, was the complete cycle of the moon was the month.
exactly. And then, in order to give some perspective to that natural movement, then we developed the isn't it the sun clock? And then the sundial or whatever it is. And then we came to the mechanical clock and now the digital clock. And the calendars, the Gregorian calendar and the different calendars. And every religious belief has a different start of the calendar year.
Yeah, and I'll make a point, and yeah, that's a great point. And some people say that actually, since we've lost that touch, that we marked time by the passing of the moon and everything, that is entrained with our circadian rhythm. And when we started going with the Gregorian calendar, then we lost a lot of our connection with the tides and the rising and the falling of the energies and so forth. But I was going to say something about the nature of time. One of the words that we use when we talk about time is now. And there are two, and he mentions it in here, the mystic time of now is the eternal present. It's not the psychological time that we're talking about, the one that we formed, as Thee says, is the illusion with states of consciousness. That psychological time, that it's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Right now, it's whatever minute it is. But eternal now, people say, mystics say, live in the now. They don't mean the time-bound now. They mean the eternal now, not time-bound, not psychologically bound, but eternal now. And that's what he was talking about. In the book, let's see, what does he say? He says, but if the present were always present and did not pass into past time, it would obviously not be time, but eternity. So that's the eternal present now, as opposed to the clock. So we're talking about two different things. It's kind of like we're talking about awareness. We can talk about awareness of, which is one thing, versus awareness that holds everything, the source of all awareness, which is a state of consciousness, as opposed to awareness of is dualistic. It's got an observer and an observed, rather than just one source that holds all. So time has an observer and an observed. But now the eternal now mystical now has no observer and observed.
And another aspect of time is an illusion to a higher being, but it's real to the lower one that's in it. For example, cause and effect took time to arrive. When you're in the physical plane, it must follow that law where the cause and then there's the effect. And that's waiting for that to happen. There's creating a past and a future. And whereas if you're not in the physical realm and you're in the higher realm, things happen spontaneously without waiting for the cause and effect. All of that happen instantly. So there's no time.
There's no time. Yes.
There's no such thing as past and future. If you think of a place, you're there. If you have something in your mind intended to create something, it's created. So there's no waiting time between. So there's no past and there's no future of waiting for it to come. It's instantaneously occurred. So it's different on different realm as far as time goes. But in each realm that the consciousness fix itself into that realm, that become real for that particular condition.
There's an interesting paragraph at the end that I like to read is, if any fraction of time be conceived that cannot now be divided even into the most minute momentary point, this alone is what we may call time present. But this flies so rapidly from future to past that it cannot be extended by any delay. For if it is extended, it is then divided into the past and future. But the present has no extension whatsoever. And in line with what Marcus here says, is every instant of time is a pinprick of eternity. Every, like now, I'm going to say something now, it's already the past. Right?
Yeah, it is also true. If you think of, just think about our globe for an instant. If you have to travel from here to Australia, it takes time to get there, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because you are fixing yourself into this body, this physical body, moving along this object, bigger object. Well, suppose if you are this Earth, how long would it take you to go from the US to Australia? If you are the whole Earth yourself, it'll take no time at all. Because your consciousness now just cover everything. It wouldn't be, for instance, if you travel from one side of your fingertip to the other side of your fingertip, if you are a bacteria on it, it takes forever to get from one end to the other end. But if you are this body, you're already there instantaneously, isn't it? So it grows with the consciousness um, as well.
Mm-hmm.
So how big is your consciousness also determining how long the time going to be, how instantaneous it's going to be.
Any other thoughts on time before we move forward? Yep.
Good.
Oh, wait, is this? Oh, this one. The next one is an antidote for modern ailments. How the secret doctrine can be an antidote for modern ailments. Now, without a deep sense of purpose, can one be fully human? And there's so much going around about purpose, and we always think that we have to have a big, grand old dream for purpose, right? But living life with purpose, what does that mean? Do we feel we're being swept along relentlessly by blind and impersonal forces to destinations unknown? Or are we spending time searching out the reasons for the existence of every part of our life? So the Secret Doctrine provides us with a broad, timeless perspective by speaking of eternity and the illusionary nature of time, by describing grand evolutionary cycles of immense magnitude. So as we assimilate the divine principle, the sense of hopelessness dissipates, outer circumstances lose their power to disturb us, and we no longer feel divided and isolated from the rest of humanity. Spending a few hours with the Secret Doctrine can be effective antidote for the maladies of modern life. So I see it as seeing our life more than this physical existence. And death is part of life, and there is continuation of something beyond this physical existence. Any thoughts, input on that one? Nope. Let's go on to the next one, a fool's errand. What is a fool's errand? Pious pontificator or innocent naive, to continually speak in length of the absolute, the unspeakable, is likely a fool's errand. Instead, turn to the wisdom of those who have had a glimpse into the nature of the ultimate reality. And here are some quotes from the Upanishads. The ever unchangeable is devoid of sound, touch, form, taste, or smell. It is without beginning or end, ever beyond the cause of all evolution. Where the eyes go not, speech goes not, nor the mind. The absolute is described as not this or that, and so on by negatives, only. So this reminds me of, it's like the Tao. You can't explain it, you can't touch it, there's no, it is beyond our five senses.
Yes, in the last meeting when we talk about the mind, this is the reference point that I was saying. It is before the mind. Mind, something happened later on. This is part where in the Upanishad explain that this is what contain all of that. This container is
Right.
unspeakable because it is before the mind. There's no thought, no divine intent even manifested just yet.
Well, it's unmanifested, and that's why
it's not even unmanifested, because unmanifested implying there's a manifestation, there's a thought pattern there. There's not even a thought pattern anywhere.
There's no thought pattern in that absolute. So that's absolute. And however, for us as individuals, we can connect to that. And to be able to connect to that, we have to let go of the analytical mind and go into the higher mind.
Well,
because everything is possible. Everything is there in this absolute. And when we're connected to the absolute, we can bring in the unmanifested into manifestation. And we talked about that greatness. I think we looked at Beethoven, right? How did these people get this music, great music and great artists from centuries before? Where did all this come from? The ideas coming from, I believe, this source into their minds, and then they manifested into beautiful music and art. True.
Yes, but that is still in the realm of mind and manifestation.
No, you
but
don't
that
have
is
to.
that is true.
This is.
But you are not separate from that. You are that already.
We are. That's what I'm saying. We are already that.
Right. We already that.
Analytical mind that.
We just need
that
to
separates.
come to a realization that we are that.
This is what it talks about in essay 8 about bridging that gap. And the gap gets bigger and bigger is because of our analytical mind and our conditioning. And we talked about conditioning in the previous chapters, how we are so conditioned by our identity. We are conditioned in essay number 5. We are conditioned by culture, media, environment, religion. All that conditioning has separated us from this source, from this absolute. And that's why it's all about bridging that gap. And we can't use, you're right, T, you cannot use the mind, the so-called mind that we know, the analytical mind, the judgmental mind, to connect. It has to be a higher mind with no thought.
To me, the absolute is, think of it like a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper. And then based on that blank piece of paper, you draw one circle, right? Like T said, the logical container is a container of everything. You draw that one little circle and you represent that as the intuition level, the realm of intuition where you think about it. And then within that circle, you draw yet another smaller circle where the mind or the intellect is operating. And then within that, you draw another circle inside of that one where the astral realm is working, your emotional body is working. And then within that, you have yet another circle that represents your physical body. So to me, you are that piece of paper already. You just happen with these vehicles that we're working against. These vehicles can only operate within the realm they're operating in, with the limitation of the circle that they're operating in. So that's why we put this artificial boundary to ourselves based on the vehicle that we're using, or the consciousness where our consciousness is putting the vehicle in place. So we often, like we discussed the last time, we often misidentify ourselves with the vehicle that we're using. And that's the part of the problem. So to describe the absolute, if you describe the absolute as only the mind, or only the astral body, emotional body, or only your physical body, that it's just wrong altogether. And that's why the saying, the last saying say, is really not this, it's not that. And everything you point to is not the absolute, but it is part of the absolute. To me, it is part of the absolute. You just misidentify yourself with what it is, the absolute.
Right. And here, in the same chapter, I.K. Tamini says, the fact that it's called unknowable does not mean that it is beyond the range of philosophical or religious thought and something on which thinking is impossible or undesirable. It is unknowable and yet the highest object of realization. Unthinkable and yet the most profound object of philosophical inquiry. So, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was thinking that it's somewhat analogous to like an eye. If a doctor, an eye doctor, studies the eye, they're going to study all these components of the eye, and then maybe me as a layperson would know the eye in terms of there's an iris, somebody's eyes are pretty, there's white and everything. But basically, the whole reason we're doing that is so we can see. Everybody wants the quality of seeing, but that's not something really that can be quantified or qualified. Seeing, actually what happens when we see what we see, that's something that can't really be written about. We can say, okay, the cones and rods do this, that, and the other, but that's not seeing. It's still another pointer to the aspect of seeing, but seeing, we can't really describe that. And so there's the physical seeing, but also what we're talking about, I think, is spiritual seeing. So spiritual sight is even more elusive. It's even more difficult to speak of, but we do, because in our exuberance and excitement of maybe even lifting the veil or touching it just momentarily, we want to share it. And so people share it through poetry, through art, through
Music.
Music especially, and then writing. And so we want to write about it, and then we're in meetings like this and we're talking about it too. It's still so majestic and amazing that we want to bring it up, whether we can do it adequately or inadequately. We still want to look toward that.
And what comes to my mind is what Lao Tzu also said, that those who know don't talk, and those who talk don't know. Because when you know, when you realize this the absolute, and you want to talk about it, you cannot really express it the way you realized it.
Sure, there are no words that can
Yes,
express it.
that's very true, John. Your consciousness become a point of the expression. Then you no longer the whole you as an absolute. The one of the disciple of the Buddha, the Gautama Buddha, he expressed that as a container. I think that's very practical for us to visualize, like space. Space is eternal, infinite. It's neither object or subject. And it's right in front of us, and we are in it. Space contains both spiritual and matter. You are not spiritual and you're not matter either, but you are the container of them both. That become an easy reference. Should it become too, too hard to grasp? So think of space, infinite space, as a container. In the Veda and also in the Upanishad, also pointed out the very aspect that we just talked about, that we're trying to talk about it, that the absolute. It said that in the beginning there are no two. There's no second. I'm sorry. In the beginning, there's no second. There's no contrary. There's no counterpart. And that's referencing to the same thing that we're trying to express here, absolute. Which is easy to reference when we think about space as a container, because this space is neither object nor subject. And in the first few pages of the Secret Doctrine, it says space is the absolute.
Thank you, T. That kind of leads us, gives us a segue to the next chapter, which talks about space and reality, right? Unless anyone has anything else to say about chapter 13.
Shanthi, could you go to the previous slide, number 12, please?
Sure.
On the last one, is it supposed to read melodies or maladies?
Oh. What did I put? What was it supposed to be?
No, I'm asking you, is it supposed to be, did you intend it to be melodies or did you intend it to be maladies?
Let's see what the book said. Maybe I was thinking of maladies. Well, what is it? It was from the book. Spending a few hours, Antidote of what does the book say?
I'm trying to find it.
I can't. Oh, spending. It's a first. Spending a few hours. Can be melodies. Melodies.
Melodies.
Oops. Yeah, not melodies. Melodies. Maladies. Melodies. Thank you, Jamshid. Anything else before we go on into the 14? Oh, sorry. A flight of fancy. So here they give an example of our perception of reality, right? What is our reality? Our reality, we all live in our world of our experiences, our conditioning, and all of that stuff. But what if we were to take ourselves out of there and we are suspended in space, like T was saying, we go into space. What is space? Space is the one eternal thing that we can most easily imagine, immovable in its abstraction and uninfluenced by either the presence or absence in it of an objective universe. And what if we're suspended in space and view everything from a different perspective? And suddenly our perception of life and everything else just changes. And this kind of brings to mind the recent, the 4 of the people who went to, was it SpaceX thing that went up into space and came back, and how the reality just changed. Was it that recent?
Yeah, they should. Or everybody wants to go outside and see how small our
How
Earth
small
is,
we are. Mm-hmm.
and we are only a blue speck of dust suspended in the sunbeam. In the trillions and the trillion to the exponential of trillions, we are just here dying and left and right and drowning in
Killing
our
each other.
drowning in our emotion and killing and hating, and we are so eager to do all of that over this speck of dust.
Yes. And if we all could just suspend ourselves in there, and our world that we knew will definitely change. There will be an instant mindset change. All that we were conditioned and accustomed would just be no longer, it would be so minute that what we're fighting for will be sound so silly and so minute and so just unimportant.
Yeah, I don't know if any of you saw the Thursday night video when Richard Smalley, Thursday night, every Thursday night, there is a live feed on Facebook from the Theosophical Society, the national. And Richard Smalley interviewed Freetop Capra, who was the author of the first famous book he wrote was The Tao of Physics. And Richard Smalley asked the question, he said, my son, who's 11, which can't even believe this, asked the question, if someone, it's similar to the koan, but if there's no one to observe the universe, is the material universe actually there? And what he's basically talking about is what is reality. And so Freetop Capra, in about the first 10 minutes, answered that question. And it's very fascinating if you get a chance to look at the last on the Theosophical Society YouTube channel, the last edition with Capra. It's pretty interesting the way he answers that.
Hmm.
I also watched today a YouTube movie, a documentary on what is reality. It just happened by chance. And it was quite fascinating. And it goes back to one of the Hindu philosophers who said that there is no reality actually. There is nothing real. And from there, then the concept of atom, and then from atom to electrons and neutrons and protons, and then further dividing that atom into another 24 kinds of electrons and protons, and then that another thing was God, God electron, and from there also they went further. Still, they can't really say is matter real or not, because for matter to exist or to form its shape, it needs forces. It needs a gravitational force. It needs electromagnetic forces and other forces. And they still can't find out how the matter is, what matter looks like now in different shapes. So in that way, if we look at that way, it looks very complicated. And then they were saying that actually the whole cosmos is only 5% of matter. What we say that these are galaxies, these are stars, this is only 5%. And then 20% is dark matter, and then the rest is all darkness. So we still don't know even if the matter is real or not scientifically. It was a very fascinating 1 hour documentary. So many concepts, but the way they have put it is really interesting. If you would like, I can send the link in the email replying to the same.
Yes, please. That would be interesting.
Do you know who
But-
this, you said there was a scientist, do you know who it was?
No. This was a documentary.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a documentary on matter. Basically, what is reality? Is there a reality or not? That it was very interesting, and starts from the Hindu philosopher who just philosophically he said uh, there is nothing real, and then they from there they went on, and then in 800 years that Greek philosopher came up with atom, and then from there, and in 19th century we came to know what is atom. 18th century we came to know there is something like atom which can't be further broken. Then we came to know no atom can be broken, we have electrons. Then we came to know no, it can be further broken, there are protons. Then we came to know no, it can be further broken, there are neutrons. And then and so on and so on. So there are around 24 to 25 elements which make one atom actually. And in one of the last matter is, they call it, that is God, that is God atom or something like that. But then again, they found that, but then again, they just don't know how that matter matter exists really, how that matter forms a mass. And because for mass, all these things to come together and work together, there are forces which are gravitational, electromagnetic, and some other two more forces, and they can't find out how that works really, still can't.
Yes, I watched a similar documentary on the History Channel where they put they create a vacuum where they suck all the air out and there's nothing left inside of this, and it's just vacuum. But as they observing it, suddenly there are matter and antimatter just pop in and then pop out. It it become matter for an instant, then it go back to energy again, and it's the two matter, antimatter and matter, meet up, pop out, and then annihilate each other, and then return to its former form, which is energy. They too have no explanation of how that's created.
So at
And
the end of the day, everything is just energy.
yeah, we don't know still, because to even energy to work, it needs some other forces also. To be energy to be created, it needs other forces as well. So anyway, this experiment was $1 billion experiment they were trying to do, and somehow they haven't come up with any explanation yet. And I think the personal thing is quite complicated, and rather than looking outside, the best thing is that when you started this session, look inside. Whatever we can find with a little consciousness, maybe that's the answer for us at this time to understand. Some souls are more advanced, they can understand things metaphysically better than us. So I rather look inside than look outside to find what is there and what is not there.
I totally agree. And I think as Theosophists, we do that, but always just going inside and being curious. And again, to me, this life, I mean, our life, that is the purpose. There is no grander purpose other than going inside and being curious and connecting to that source, whatever that source. It is not in any form, or it's in a, for me personally, it's like energy, connecting to that high source of energy and being curious. That is our ultimate purpose, and bringing ourselves up to a higher level of consciousness and seeing things from a grander perspective than what is going on in the world around us. And I believe why we're having so many problems is so many people have disconnected from themselves, disconnected from going within. It's only my personal opinion, but anybody else? Before we move on, go ahead, John.
Well, I think I was trying to understand this thought experiment which David proposed in this essay. But he went on to say that all that your conditioned mind was accustomed to has passed into oblivion. And I don't know whether you understand this thought experiment. Exactly what is he trying to say? Because I'm very confused in terms of what is in this essay.
Which was the statement that you were referring to?
Well, a flight of fancy, right?
Oh, okay, the whole thing.
And, yeah, and he gives this thought experiment, right? Where the whole constellations disappear in front of you, and you know.
Okay. So okay, so from my perspective, right, what I understand is when we come into the world, we're so conditioned, we're already conditioned by separation. And I think we talked about this earlier on when we started this chapter. We're conditioned when we come into this life, when we're born. Are we born with this blank slate, like the white piece of paper that Drake talked about? Are we born? When we are born, we bring in the conditioning of our ancestors, our generational conditioning. We come out into this world, and then we are separated. Okay, male, female, race, color. We are further separated more and more and more. Religion, culture, tradition, which is not good, bad, right, or wrong. And then at one point in our lives, we realize, well, some of us realize that what we're taught is not right. And then we try to come back into this oneness. So to me, what we're saying is now break away from the conditioning. If you were to go within yourself and imagine you are not man, you're not woman, you are not any color, there's no gender, that you are not a title, you are nothing. You are nothing but pure energy. I want you to feel into that. And what does that feel like?
Okay.
Can I
Oh.
put another thing? John, I was just thinking, suppose that you have a busy schedule. You get up and you're just scheduled every minute of the day. And then all of a sudden somebody called up and said, you know what? School is closed. There's nothing today. You don't have those 5 meetings that you couldn't possibly meet. You have nothing to do. And then you have nothing to do on your to-do list. There'd be an acclamation. You think, okay, well, now what am I going to do? And this is taking it further. It's saying, let's just not suppose your daily calendar is taken away, or your home is taken away, or your relationships are taken away, or your friends are taken away. Let's say everything you know as reality is taken away. Then what? Well, eventually you would get used to it, but it would take some acclimation to get used to it. And that's what it's saying. It's just going, using hyperbole, because that's probably not going to happen. We're probably not going to have everything taken away momentarily, but it's just like, if the slate was blank, what would you do? Well, you would have to accommodate. You'd still be there. You'd have to acclimate. You will still exist if you didn't have a body. We know that. You will still exist. There will still be a you in a different form. This is just a physical manifestation of who we are, this body. We chose, so our purpose is, how do we want to choose to live in this body with this life experience? What do we want to experience? And so yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I guess another way might be if
John, I think I can explain.
Okay.
Yeah, to me, this essay is about a simulation. He's trying to give you a simulation of what it feels like when your consciousness being removed from different vehicle. So first, he take you through the process of removing you from your daily physical body, your space you're in, the world, the earth, and then eventually all the way to Prahlaya, which is literally darkness, completely darkness, right? All you have left is your consciousness. You're aware of the consciousness that you are filled with this void, this darkness, which is all there is now. So it's a simulation to take you from the point where you're so busy, your mind, your consciousness is so busy, so focused on this physical body, on this brain, this mind that you're working with, all the activity that's going on in your daily life, all the way to the point where you isolate and you move all of that. You don't depend on them anymore. Now you are resting your consciousness on this empty space, Prahlaya, where nothing exists, complete darkness. It's a simulation, essentially, trying to get your mind back to the origin, the point of origin, which is emptiness.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And
I got it.
You got it. Okay. So I think the closest example in this life experience would be, I'm sure all of you have heard of the Vipassana meditation, right? Now, in today's world, take away your electronics, just your electronic stuff. No cell phone, no TV, nothing. I mean, we get like, oh my God, what am I going to do? There's nothing to look at. There's nothing to stare at. There's nothing to listen. There's no outside stimulation. That's what Vipassana is all about. Cutting off the outer world, and you are left with your inner world, and all the you can't see. There's no eye contact. You eat with other people, but no eye contact, no talking. You're left with your inner dialogue, your mental dialogue. And the reason why we're having so much problems is we cannot even live with ourselves, with our inner dialogue. That's what's bothering us. And when we're bothered on the inside, that's when we create violence on the outside. Right? It all comes from within. Okay. Anything else? We can move on to 15. Oh, this is the famous answer. How did the world come into being? So there's different versions of beliefs on how the world came into being. There's the Christian theologians.
Let me just ask a question before that. And that is, it seems like there's like 15 more. How many more are there before next, after this one? How long are we going to go?
2 more. We're only going up to 16 today.
Oh, okay. Thank
We're
you.
not going, yeah, we're not going the
Okay.
entire.
Okay, good. I'll stay for it then. Good.
Yeah, because, yeah. Oops, now I
No, no, and
Oh.
you cannot go until we are done all of it.
Because you are an integral part of this conversation. And
Well, I was on another call. I was on another one just before I got on this one. So I've been sitting here for hours.
Oh my gosh, I'm going, okay, so where is it? Okay. Okay, this is the 15, and then we got 16, and that's the end of that one. Christian theologians subscribe to the belief that God created the universe out of nothing. And then there has the Roman philosopher Lucretius in his poem, The Nature of Things, from nothing, nothing is produced. From the Upanishads, the idea that the cosmos was created out of the being of God. And the idea that the cosmos was created by some external and pre-existent type of matter by a divine being or principle. So what does Theosophy have to say? To flow out of form. It implies an unfolding from within to without, from potential to actual, from latent to the manifest. Madame Blavatsky's observation in the Secret Doctrine, Christian theology long ago rejected the doctrine of emanations and replaced them with direct conscious creations of angels and the rest out of nothing. Well, what is true?
I was a bit surprised when he was using the word emanation, right?
Emanation. Mhm.
Instead of evolution.
So, did it evolve or was it created? That's a good question.
Because from what I learned in Theosophy, most of the time we talk about evolution and not so much with emanation. This is the first time I actually see in some sort of theosophical work actually talk about the word emanation. So do you get is that the same perspective from your point, or is that something new that I just observed?
Okay. That's a good point.
Well, he addresses that in the chapter. I mean, he addresses it in the chapter, I think, why he uses it. You know, he says in a word, emanation, the term is from the Latin meaning to flow out from. It implies an unfolding from within to without, from potential to actual, from the latent to the manifest. I think he is just justifying his use. And he does. He says Theosophists call it emanation, and then he gives 25 as his footnote, so we can find out where he got that from. If we can get to 25 and just see where that came from.
Key to Theosophy, I think. Theosophy. 25. When was it?
27. So Blavatsky did use that word.
So is that the word being used in the Secret Doctrine, or is that something that will borrow from elsewhere?
Blavatsky used it in the Key to Theosophy.
Yeah, Key to Theosophy.
Okay.
And she also used it she has it in the Theosophical Glossary as well, I think.
Okay, that makes sense now, because I think that's the one that we're gonna cover in the next lesson. The three aspects of the logos.
Yes.
Yes, emanation is also used in this Secret Doctrine. You know, from the divine man form and spark. It used that in the Secret Doctrine trick.
Okay, so it had to do with the third logo. The third logo, essentially, that's when it happens. Okay.
The
Thank
third
you.
logo is the connection between the first and the second.
Yeah.
And
If
it
you
seems
read-
like evolution is more of a scientific word and emanation is more of a spiritual word.
Okay.
The context in which they're used.
So from nothing, so going back to what we discussed a few chapters ago, the absolute of nothing, from nothing evolved, something came about, right? Was it that one? The absolute. Any other thoughts on this?
What is the question here? How did the world come into being?
Yeah, how did the world come into being? And yeah,
Well,
I think. Sorry.
that is a tough one, because you have a lot of ground to cover just to
I know.
get a glimpse of just that. Well, for
I
one, then understand the nature of Brahma is always expanding, always in motion. And that's the starting point for how things start to flowing from one into the other through the process of differentiation. And that's how things are formed, based on the Secret Doctrine, teaching. But is to give just one answer how thing come to being, it, man, you're gonna need to sit down for years to just figure this one just a little bit.
Well, and so bringing it down to our level, I think it again further implies unfolding from within to without, goes back to our discussion. Like our purpose is to go within ourselves to create without the outer world that we only can create from within. What we create inside will impact others, will impact the world, and it will come back to us and will create a positive feedback flow. So if we create something within that is cruel or mean or ugly, it will impact others in the world and it will come back to us. That's a negative feedback cycle. So I think we all have a choice so in practical terms, how to always bring it down to practical terms in today's, how we can apply this practically today, right? That's the way I see it. From within, create out. So what we want to see. So it goes back to, I think Gandhi is the one, be the change you want to see in the world. Be the change you want to see in the world. We expect good things, but then inside we have thoughts that are not good or whatever, but then we expect everything outside to be wonderful and beautiful. It's in contradiction. Does that make sense?
Okay, then you confused me. I thought the question was about the origin of how things manifested
course.
out today.
You know, when I read these things, how the world, I mean, it's such a big question. I always try to put it in a practical application. I mean, at the end of the day, I have to live a day-to-day life, right? How am I going to apply what I have read and create a world that I want to live in? We all live in our own little world, but how do I create this world when I relate to other people, other things? I mean, my co-workers, relationship. I want a practical application to what I have learned. Otherwise, it's just reading knowledge. It doesn't become wisdom. And that's how I apply it. I mean, otherwise we can go into a discussion and a rat hole. Yeah, how the world. Yes, it's a great discussion. How do you bring it down to practical application?
Yeah, I can see practical is good, but how long do you plan to be practical on this
As
earth?
long as I live, I want to create a world from within to without. I mean, as long as we live, we have to go within and create a world we want to see. It is our job.
What was your question, T? What was your statement? How did you get started on that? Would you repeat
I
that?
started that from this. It implies an unfolding from within to without, from potential to actual, from latent to manifest. So everything is potentially out there. The possibilities are out there. Like I said, if we came from that blank piece of paper, that we are connected to that potential of all possibilities. But we can choose what possibility, we can choose to create what we want, but we only create from our thoughts and how we behave and act, right?
Well, that's one step on the spiritual path.
Right.
I mean, I think at some point we might just go into surrender and say, you know, I've already tried to manipulate the universe to meet my particular wants and desires enough, and now I'm going somewhere else. But there are lots of practical applications, Shanti, to creating
Of
something.
course.
Because if I need a book, then you know, I'm certainly open to the universe giving me a hunch on where to find it, you know, and I can say, look, I really need help. And that's a choice to ask for help, and I get help. But what was it that you were taking opposition to? I'm not quite clear.
I was thinking, first I started out with the question, how did the world come to being? I was thinking about the origin of everything, but then I heard Shanthi say something about how does that tie to practical daily experience, daily life.
Okay.
And then my thought go into a different route than I'm asking that how long do we plan to be plunged into this world? When do we plan to get out? I mean, if we keep going to a hotel, motel, whatever, and we dress up really nice, and then within 3 days we have to leave the hotel, we spend all that effort in there for nothing. Instead of identifying something eternal, we identify ourselves with something that's always on the changing, and then we lose our balance when that thing is out of sight and changing. And that's what I'm thinking now. And that's have to turn inward. After a while, you're gonna get tired because you're like a mouse running into the little circle, running one place. At some point, there has to be an exit point where you discover it's right between spiritual and matter. The pendulum swinging from left to right, and then smack dab in the middle, there's an exit point. That's the harmonial point. That's the equilibrium point. That's the exiting point for karma. And that is where eternal now rests.
I want to say, I think that there is a difference of opinion, and it began a long time ago in terms of separating this aspect that we call matter something separate from consciousness. And it tends to be a more feminine perspective to make everything sacred. For example, if you get up, or a monk would get up, and everything is sacred. In other words, I'm not looking at my light or my lamp or my room or my house or anything. I'm not looking at that to fulfill myself spiritually. I'm not longing after that. I'm not hunting that. But if everything is sacred, I don't have to go anywhere because it's all here. I mean, there's no within and without. Everything is sacred. And it tends that the masculine point of view tends to be more of, let's do austerity. And then it got taken to the extreme with mortification. But the feminine perspective, which was ripped out, especially, starting back as the patriarchy came. And so the Eastern religions and the Western religions just took this on. And that is that we have to fight matter and be different from matter, but there is a perspective of that matter is sacred. And I also say there is and I do know that Blavatsky had she had a practicality about her as well, even though, of course, she spent so much time writing. But there was one time when Annie Besant was meditating, and Blavatsky goes up to her and says, "You are just efforting too much. This is easy. Just let go. Don't make this so hard. This should be effortless for you." And I just love that aspect, when she said that, because she was just saying, don't take this so seriously, even though I know she wrote things that were very poignant and applicable and heavy and intellectual and non-intellectual. She still had that practical aspect that said, we're in this world, just cool, just chill out.
That's the practicality. Yeah. I think we can learn from that. And I think that's what I meant. Thank you.
Yeah. And it's not, practicality is not grasping. It's not looking to something. Yeah. It's not looking to something, in the Western search for materialism, everybody's trying to get more, whether it's spiritual materialism, more intellectual, more spiritual knowledge, or whether it's that we're trying to get things, it's this materialism. So, I mean, we've got scientific materialism as well. It's not that, but we can still have the material without any of those aspects of it.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes.
Getting close to noon. So do you want to go ahead and cover the last one, or you want to pause right here?
Let's pause right here because the other one 16 is defining. Oh yeah, 16 is very short. It's just defining the logos before we go deeper into the logos, what the logos are. So very quickly, let's finish. Logos here. I don't know why my mouse decides to 14, 15, 16. There you go. It's a creative force within the presence of intelligence. So I think this is where I think Trade mentioned before, a circle with the dot in the center. What logos is a Greek term translated as word, speech, a principle, or a thought. Also referred to as universal divine reason or the mind of God. And in the New Testament, the Gospel of John begins, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So it's basically universal principle, right? And center of spiritual energy, which is unborn and eternal, which exists in a latent condition in the bosom of Parabrahman at the time of, okay, that is, let me give an explanation of that, of Pralaya, and starts at the center of conscious energy at the time of cosmic activity. What is Parabrahman? Attainment of the ultimate goal. And Prayala, a period of dissolution or destruction of the manifested universe at the end of a period of time. according to Hindu philosophy.
I think personally that logos is pretty deep and that it's not
Yes.
something to be gone over swiftly. If you want to take more time, but let's not cram the concept of logos, which is powerful, into just try to put it in a minute or two. Whether the section's short or not, it's a powerful principle.
It goes much, much deeper, into
Yes.
So that would be good. We could get the beginning and then go the deeper and have it all in one swath as opposed to dividing it up. My opinion only.
sounds good. It's right at 12. We can stop right here and start next week at next lesson at defining logos.
Yeah, logo is very lengthy. It's very deep. It's not short like it's showing here. It's very deep.
It is.
If you're describing the source, yes. It gets very deep. So we're going to pause this point. I want to thank you everyone for attending and thank you for contributing your idea and sitting through the entire 2 hour. Sorry for the technical difficulty at the beginning of the meeting today. Try to be here earlier next time. So hopefully we can resolve these technical issue ahead of time. Okay, so thank you everyone and have a good weekend. And for those of you that work for the government, enjoy Martin Luther King Jr. holiday for Monday.
Oh yeah.
Anyone have the Monday off?
And Tuesday
Yes.
for us.
I do.
Yeah.
And Wednesday, some Hero Confederate Day for Texas.
Wow.
Well, thank you. Have everyone.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you,
weekend.
everybody.
Thank you,
Bye.
Shanti. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.